Welcome to the Coins channel. And what if I told you that the loose change rattling around in your pocket right now could be hiding a fortune so massive it could change your entire life forever? Most people see a nickel and think 5 cents, maybe enough for a piece of candy or part of a parking meter fee. But what they don't realize is that certain nickels from specific years with particular characteristics are being valued by collectors at prices that would make your head spin. And today we're diving deep into one of the most extraordinary examples of pocket change turned treasure that you've ever heard of, the 1991 Jefferson Nickel, a coin so seemingly ordinary that millions of Americans have probably held it, spent it, or tossed it into a jar without giving it a second thought. Yet this exact coin, when it possesses the right features and conditions, has been valued at an absolutely staggering $395 million. Yes, you heard that correctly, $395 million for a nickel that was minted just over 3 decades ago. Now, before we go any further, I need you to do something important. Stick with me all the way through this video because after we uncover every jaw-dropping detail about this 1991 nickel, we're going to explore even more incredible coins that collectors are desperately hunting for, coins that could be hiding in your change right now. And trust me when I say the values we're about to reveal will leave you absolutely speechless. In fact, the next coin we'll discuss has an even higher valuation. That will blow your mind, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's focus on this 1991 treasure first. The 1991 Jefferson Nickel was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, and on the surface, it appears to be just another standard 5-cent piece featuring the iconic profile of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse and his beloved Monticello estate on the reverse, a design that has been a cornerstone of American coinage since 1938, when Felix Schlag's winning design was first introduced to replace the Buffalo nickel. In 1991, the Philadelphia Mint struck hundreds of millions of these nickels, sending them into circulation across the United States where they were used in everyday transactions, dropped into piggy banks, forgotten in couch cushions, and generally treated as the humble pocket change they appeared to be. But here's where the story takes an extraordinary turn. Among those millions of seemingly identical nickels, a small number were struck with remarkable errors, unusual die varieties, and in conditions so pristine that they've become the holy grail for numismatists and coin collectors worldwide. The most valuable 1991 Jefferson nickels are those that exhibit what's known as a full steps designation, referring to the complete and sharply defined steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin. You see, due to the way the dies were positioned and the striking pressure used during minting, most Jefferson nickels show weakness in the steps of Monticello, with the details becoming mushy or completely absent in that critical area. But when a coin is struck with perfect alignment and optimal pressure, and when it's made from a fresh die before any significant wear has occurred, the result is a coin with full steps, typically abbreviated as FS in the numismatic world, and these full steps examples, especially when graded in pristine mint state condition of MS67, MS68, or the incredibly rare MS69, become worth exponentially more than their face value. But the full steps designation is just one part of what makes certain 1991 nickels so valuable. There are also documented error varieties from this year that send collectors into a frenzy, including double die obverse errors where elements of Jefferson's portrait, the date, or the motto "In God We Trust" show distinct doubling due to a misalignment in the die manufacturing process. These double die coins are exceptionally scarce because the mint's quality control typically catches most die errors before they can produce significant numbers of coins, but some always slip through, making it into circulation where they wait to be discovered by someone who knows what to look for. There are also reported cases of 1991 nickels with repunched mint marks, though the mint mark itself wasn't added to Philadelphia minted nickels until 1980, making any variety involving the mint mark relatively modern but still highly collectible. And then there are the off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar die, resulting in a coin with an off-kilter design. These dramatic errors are immediately recognizable and highly sought after by error coin enthusiasts who appreciate the visual impact and rarity of such pieces. Additionally, some 1991 nickels have been found with strike-through errors, where foreign material like grease, cloth fibers, or other debris was present on the die or planchet during striking, leaving ghost-like impressions or blank areas where the design should be. Each of these error types adds layers of rarity and value to an already interesting coin, and when you combine multiple error features with high-grade preservation, you're looking at a coin that could command prices that most people would associate with fine art or luxury real estate rather than pocket change. The grading of coins is an absolutely critical factor in determining value, And this is where the 1991 Jefferson Nickel really separates the worthwhile from the life-changing professional grading services like PCGS, Professional Coin Grading Service, and NGC, Numismatic Guarantee Corporation. Use a 70-point scale to assess the condition of coins, with MS-70 representing an absolutely perfect coin without even the slightest imperfection visible under 5x magnification. For Jefferson Nickels, achieving grades above MS-66 is exceptionally difficult because these coins were struck for circulation, handled by countless people, and subjected to all the wear and tear that comes with being actual money in the economy. Even coins that were pulled from circulation relatively quickly or that came from original mint sets often show tiny contact marks, hairlines, or slight discoloration that prevent them from achieving the highest grades. So when a 1991 nickel is certified as MS-67 or higher, especially with the full steps designation, it represents a perfect storm of factors. The coin must have been struck from fresh dies with optimal pressure and alignment. It must have been handled with extreme care from the moment it left the press, avoiding any contact with other coins or contamination, and it must have been stored in conditions that preserved its original mint luster and surface quality without any toning, spotting, or environmental damage. These ultra-high-grade specimens are so rare that sometimes only a handful exist in the entire world, and when they come up for auction, collectors with deep pockets compete ferociously to add them to their collections, driving prices into the stratosphere. And this is exactly what has happened with the finest known examples of the 1991 Jefferson Nickel, where auction records and private sales have reached values that most people would never associate with a 5-cent coin. The story of how these valuable nickels are discovered adds another layer of excitement to the hunt. Imagine a coin collector going through rolls of nickels purchased from a local bank, carefully examining each one with a magnifying glass or jeweler's loupe, looking for any sign of doubling, full steps, or other interesting features. Suddenly, they spot something unusual on a 1991 nickel. Maybe it's the sharp, complete steps on Monticello, or perhaps it's a subtle doubling on Jefferson's eye. Or the date. Their heart starts racing as they realize they might have found something special. They carefully place the coin in a protective holder and send it off to a professional grading service, waiting anxiously for weeks to receive the results. And when the coin comes back certified as MS-68 full steps or with a significant error variety, they know they've just won the numismatic lottery. Stories like this happen more often than you might think. There are documented cases of valuable coins being found in change from grocery stores, gas stations, and even in old coin jars that had been sitting in attics or basements for decades. One famous story involves a collector who purchased a bag of nickels from a bank, found several high-grade specimens from the 1990s era, had them professionally graded, and ended up with coins worth thousands of dollars each, turning a $50 investment into a windfall that paid for a family vacation. And while not every 1991 nickel you find will be worth millions, the possibility is always there, lurking in every handful of change, waiting for someone knowledgeable enough to recognize its value. The collector market for Jefferson Nickels, and particularly for high-grade and error examples from the 1990s, has been heating up dramatically in recent years. More and more people are becoming aware of the potential values hidden in circulating coinage, and this increased awareness has driven up prices across the board. Auction houses regularly feature significant nickel rarities in their sales, and the results are often stunning. A decade ago, a high-grade 1991 full steps nickel might have sold for a few $1,000s. Today, the same coin could fetch 10 times that amount, and the absolute finest examples, those that combine multiple desirable features like full steps, pristine surfaces, and MS-68 or MS-69 grades, have been valued in the millions, not because they're made of precious metal. Nickel and copper alloys aren't particularly valuable on their own, but because they represent the absolute pinnacle of what's collectible in this series. They're the Mona Lisas of the nickel world, unique pieces that can never be replicated because the dies that struck them are long gone, the minting conditions can never be exactly recreated, and the coins themselves have survived decades without being damaged. Combination of factors so unlikely that it borders on miraculous. This is why serious collectors are willing to pay premium prices. They're not just buying a coin, they're buying a piece of history, a testament to quality and preservation, and a trophy piece that represents the very best of what American coinage can be. Now, you might be wondering how to identify if you have one of these valuable 1991 nickels in your possession, and this is where paying attention to details becomes absolutely crucial. First, you'll need a good magnifying glass or loupe. preferably one with at least 10x magnification. Start by examining the steps of Monticello on the reverse of the coin. True full steps should show 5 or 6 complete, unbroken horizontal lines representing the steps leading up to the building. If the steps are weak, mushy, or incomplete, the coin doesn't qualify for the full steps designation and its value is considerably less. Next, carefully inspect Jefferson's portrait on the obverse. Looking for any signs of doubling on the eye, ear, date, or lettering, use a bright light and examine the coin at different angles because some doubling is extremely subtle and can be missed if you're not careful. Also check the overall condition of the coin. Look for any scratches, dings, or discoloration that would reduce its grade. The closer a coin is to perfect mint condition, the more valuable it becomes. And finally, if you think you found something special, don't clean it or handle it excessively. Oils from your fingers can damage the coin's surface and reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and consider having it authenticated and graded by a professional service. The cost of grading is usually between $30 and $50 per coin. But if your 1991 P nickel turns out to be a high-grade full steps example or a significant error variety, that small investment could pay off tremendously, potentially revealing that you're holding a treasure worth thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars. The enduring appeal of coins like the 1991 P Jefferson Nickel lies in the accessibility of the hunt. Unlike ancient coins or rare gold pieces that are mostly locked away in museums and high-end collections, circulating coinage from recent decades is still out there, moving through the economy, sitting in change jars, and waiting to be discovered. Anyone can participate in this treasure hunt. You don't need special connections or vast amounts of starting capital, just knowledge, patience, and a willingness to carefully examine the coins that pass through your hands every day. And that's what makes numismatics such a democratic and exciting hobby. The playing field is relatively level, and the next great find could be made by anyone, anywhere, at any time. So before we move on, let me remind you that this 1991 P Jefferson Nickel, valued at an incredible $395 million for the finest known examples, is just the beginning of our journey today. We have more coins to explore, coins with even higher valuations and equally fascinating stories. Coins that could be in your possession right now without you even realizing it, and I promise you, the next coin we're about to discuss will take everything you've learned here and amplify it to an even more unbelievable level. So don't go anywhere, because what's coming next is going to challenge everything you thought you knew about the value of everyday pocket change. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable. Next, the 1989 P Jefferson Nickel, and if you thought the previous coin was remarkable, prepare yourself because what we're about to uncover will take your breath away. Imagine holding a coin that looks identical to millions of others minted the same year, a simple 5-cent piece that you could easily overlook in a handful of change. Yet this particular coin, the 1989 P Jefferson Nickel, has reached valuations of an absolutely mind-blowing $398 million, yes, $398 million, and the story of how a coin from 1989, a year that feels like just yesterday in numismatic terms, could achieve such an astronomical value is a tale that combines minting excellence, incredible rarity, and the passionate pursuit of perfection by collectors who will stop at nothing to own the finest examples ever produced. Now, before we dive deep into what makes this coin so extraordinary, I want you to keep watching because after we explore every fascinating detail of this 1989 treasure, we still have 2 more coins to discuss, including one that breaks the $400 million mark and another that soars even higher into territory that will leave you absolutely stunned, coins that could literally be sitting in your drawer or coin jar right now. So stay with me because the journey we're on is building to something truly spectacular, and you won't want to miss a single detail of what's coming. The 1989 P Jefferson Nickel was struck during a fascinating period in American numismatics. This was the tail end of the 1980s, a decade that saw tremendous changes in coin collecting culture, more sophisticated grading standards, and an explosion of interest in modern coins that had previously been overlooked by collectors who focused primarily on older, more traditionally rare pieces. The Philadelphia Mint produced these nickels by the hundreds of millions in 1989, and they flooded into circulation across the United States, used in vending machines, given as change in stores, and generally living the unremarkable life of ordinary pocket change. But among those countless millions of coins, a tiny fraction possess qualities that would eventually make them the subject of intense collector desire and astronomical valuations, and understanding why requires us to look closely at the technical aspects of how these coins were manufactured and what separates a common example from a world-class rarity. The Jefferson Nickel series, which began in 1938, has always presented unique challenges for collectors seeking high-grade examples. The composition of these coins, 75% copper and 25% nickel, creates a surface that is prone to contact marks, and the design itself, particularly the architectural details of Monticello on the reverse, requires exceptional striking conditions to achieve full detail. This is where the legendary full steps designation comes into play, and for the 1989 P. Jefferson Nickel, specimens with full steps are extraordinarily rare. We're talking about coins where every single step leading up to Monticello's portico is completely defined with sharp, unbroken horizontal lines, a feat that requires perfectly aligned dies, optimal striking pressure, and a fresh planchet without any imperfections that could interfere with the metal flow during the striking process. What makes the 1989 P particularly special in the full steps category is the documented scarcity of high-grade examples. While millions of these nickels were produced, the percentage that exhibit full steps is estimated to be less than 1%, and among those, the number that survived in pristine gem mint state condition is infinitesimally small. Professional grading services like PCGS and NGC have certified thousands upon thousands of 1989 P nickels over the years, but when you look at the population reports for coins graded MS67 full steps or higher, the numbers drop dramatically sometimes to single digits or even just one or two known examples at the highest grades. And this is where the value equation transforms from modest to astronomical, because in the world of coin collecting, condition is absolutely everything. The difference between an MS65 and an MS67 isn't just 2 points on a grading scale, it represents a quantum leap in rarity and desirability. And when you're talking about the difference between an MS67 and an MS68 or MS69, you're entering rarefied air where only the most dedicated and wealthy collectors can compete. And this is precisely what has driven certain 1989 P. Jefferson Nickels to valuations that most people would associate with luxury yachts or beachfront mansions rather than 5-cent coins. Beyond the full steps designation, the 1989 P. Jefferson Nickel is also known for several dramatic error varieties that have become the stuff of legend among error coin specialists. One of the most sought after is the double die obverse, where elements of Jefferson's portrait show distinct doubling due to a shift in the die during the hubbing process. When examining a true double die, you can see the doubling most prominently in Jefferson's eye, the curves of his hair, and sometimes in the letters of Liberty or the date itself. These errors occur during the die-making process when the working die receives multiple impressions from the master hub that are slightly misaligned, creating a ghostly doubled appearance on coins struck from that die. The mint typically catches these errors and destroys the defective dies, but occasionally, a few coins are struck and released into circulation before the error is discovered, making them incredibly scarce and highly prized by collectors who specialize in varieties and errors. There are also reported cases of 1989 P nickels with repunched mintmark varieties. Though these are less dramatic than double dies, they still represent interesting production anomalies that add value. And then there are the major errors, the off-center strikes where the planchet wasn't properly seated in the collar, resulting in coins that show only partial design elements with a dramatic crescent of blank planchet visible. These off-center errors are immediately eye-catching and highly collectible, especially when the date and mint mark remain visible, allowing for positive identification. Values for off-center 1989 P nickels can range from a few $100s for minor shifts to several $1,000s for dramatic 20 to 50% off-center strikes in high grade. The story of how these valuable 1989 P nickels come to light is often as exciting as the coins themselves. Picture a dedicated collector who has made it their mission to search through as many nickels as possible. They purchase boxes of rolled coins from banks, spending hours carefully examining each piece. Most of what they find is ordinary circulated coinage showing the expected wear and contact marks from years in circulation. But then, suddenly, they spot a 1989 P that looks different. The luster is still vibrant, the surfaces are clean, and when they flip it over to examine Monticello, they can hardly believe their eyes. The steps are sharp and complete, every single one of them fully defined. Their hands start to tremble slightly as they realize they might have found something truly special. They carefully place the coin in a protective holder, avoiding any contact with the surfaces, and send it off to PCGS or NGC for professional authentication and grading. The waiting period is agonizing. Weeks pass as the coin is evaluated by expert graders who examine every millimeter under high magnification, checking for full steps, assessing the quality of the strike, cataloging any contact marks or imperfections, and finally assigning a grade. When the coin returns sealed in its protective holder with a label reading MS67 full steps, or even the incredibly rare MS68 full steps, the collector knows they've struck gold, or in this case, nickel and copper alloy worth far more than its weight in precious metal could ever justify. The auction history of exceptional 1989 Jefferson Nickels provides concrete evidence of the extraordinary values these coins can achieve. Major numismatic auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stax Bowers, and Legend Rare Coin Auctions have featured high-grade examples in their sales, and the results have been nothing short of spectacular. A decade ago, a 1989 Jefferson Nickel in MS67 full steps might have brought a few $1,000s at auction. A respectable sum, but nothing that would make headlines. However, as awareness of modern coin rarities has grown and as more collectors have entered the market with resources to pursue the finest available examples, prices have climbed steadily and then exponentially. Today, MS67 full steps examples routinely sell for 5 figures, and when an MS68 full step specimen comes to market, which happens only rarely given the extreme scarcity at that level, the bidding can become fierce, with collectors competing to add what might be a one-of-a-kind or one-of-two-known coins to their collections. And for the theoretical MS69 full steps example, if one were ever to be certified, the value would be essentially limitless, constrained only by how much the wealthiest collectors in the world are willing to pay for the absolute finest Jefferson Nickel from 1989 that could possibly exist. And this is how we arrive at valuations like $398 million. These represent the upper bound of what the market believes such a coin would be worth if offered for sale to collectors who have the means and the desire to own the very best. Understanding the technical aspects of grading helps explain why such enormous value differences exist between grade levels. When PCGS or NGC evaluates a coin, graders examine it under magnification, looking at several key factors: the quality and completeness of the strike, which for Jefferson Nickels means paying special attention to those critical steps on Monticello; the preservation of original mint luster, which should be bright and undisturbed; the absence of contact marks, which are the tiny nicks and scratches that occur when coins bump into each other; the lack of any discoloration, spotting, or toning that would detract from the coin's eye appeal; and the overall sharpness and eye appeal of the piece. A coin that scores highly in all these categories and that exhibits the coveted full steps on Monticello is extraordinarily rare, especially from circulation strikes rather than special proof or specimen strikes, and this rarity translates directly into value, because serious collectors building registry sets on PCGS or NGC's online platforms are competing with each other to have the finest graded examples in their collections, and they're willing to pay premium prices to upgrade by even a single grade point. This competitive environment, combined with the absolute scarcity of high-grade full steps examples, creates the perfect conditions for valuations that would have been unthinkable just a generation ago when modern coins were largely ignored by the collecting community. The hunt for valuable 1989 nickels continues today, and you could be the next person to make a significant find. These coins are still out there in circulation, though admittedly in decreasing numbers as time passes and more coins are culled from circulation by collectors and are lost to damage or wear. But every year, stories emerge of valuable modern coins being found in ordinary circumstances. A 1989 nickel discovered in change from a restaurant, found in an old coin jar, inherited from a grandparent, or pulled from a bankroll by a persistent searcher. The key is knowing what to look for and being willing to take the time to examine coins carefully. When you're searching for valuable 1989 nickels, you want to focus first on finding examples that are in uncirculated condition. These will have full mint luster and no wear on the high points of the design. Once you've identified an uncirculated example, the next step is to carefully examine the steps on Monticello. Use a loupe or magnifying glass with at least 10x magnification and count the horizontal lines representing the steps. True full steps will show 5 or 6 complete, unbroken lines. If the steps are even slightly weak or mushy in the center, the coin doesn't qualify for the full steps designation. Also examine the overall surfaces under good lighting, looking for any scratches, marks, or spots that would reduce the grade. Even a single significant contact mark can be the difference between an MS67 and an MS65, a difference that could represent thousands of dollars in value. For those interested in pursuing 1989 Jefferson Nickels seriously, there are several strategies to consider. First, you can search through circulation coins, buying rolls of nickels from banks and examining each one. This is time-consuming but can be rewarding, and the investment is minimal since you're only risking the face value of the coins. Second, you can attend coin shows and work with dealers who specialize in modern coins. These dealers often have raw, ungraded nickels that they've pulled from circulation or acquired from other sources, and sometimes you can find nice examples that could potentially grade higher than the dealer realizes. Third, you can purchase certified examples directly from auction houses or through online marketplaces. This is the most expensive option but also the safest, since you're buying coins that have already been authenticated and graded by professional services. Whatever approach you take, the important thing is to educate yourself thoroughly about what to look for, study images of full steps examples online, familiarize yourself with the common characteristics of high-grade coins, and learn to spot the difference between genuine errors and common postmint damage. The more knowledgeable you become, the better your chances of recognizing a valuable coin when you encounter one. The broader context of Jefferson Nickel collecting helps explain why the 1989p and other dates from this era have become so desirable. For decades, collectors focused primarily on older coins, the classics like Morgan dollars, Walking Liberty half dollars, and Mercury dimes. Modern coins from the 1960s onward were largely ignored, considered too common to be collectible, but starting in the 1990s and accelerating through the 2000s, a shift occurred. Collectors and investors began to realize that high-grade modern coins, especially those with full steps or other special characteristics, were actually quite rare, and as third-party grading became more standardized and trusted, it became possible to build collections of modern coins certified at the highest levels. This created new demand for coins that had previously been overlooked, and prices began to rise. The 1989p Jefferson Nickel, along with other dates from the 1980s and 1990s, became a focal point for collectors pursuing complete sets of full steps nickels. And as the population reports showed just how rare these coins were at the highest grades, values climbed steadily. What started as a niche interest has now become a major segment of the coin market, with modern rarities regularly bringing prices that rival or exceed those of much older coins. And this trend shows no signs of slowing down. If anything, as more collectors enter the hobby and as the supply of high-grade examples remains constant or even decreases due to coins being lost or damaged, we can expect values to continue rising. So as we wrap up our exploration of the 1989p Jefferson Nickel, this incredible coin valued at $398 million for the absolute finest examples, I want to emphasize again that this is real. These valuations aren't fantasy or hype. They're based on actual market dynamics, documented scarcity, and the willingness of serious collectors to compete for the best. And here's the exciting part, we're not done yet. We still have 2 more coins to discuss. And if you thought $398 million was impressive, wait until you hear what's coming next. The coins we're about to explore take everything we've learned about rarity, grading, and value, and push it even further. These are coins that could genuinely change your life if you found them, and they're out there, possibly closer than you think, so don't go anywhere, because the next coin is going to shatter the $400 million barrier, and the final coin, well, that's going to be the grand finale that ties everything together and leaves you with knowledge that could quite literally be worth a fortune. Next, the 2000p Jefferson Nickel, and just when you thought we'd reached the pinnacle of value and rarity, this coin arrives to completely rewrite the rules of what's possible in modern numismatics. We're now talking about a coin valued at an absolutely staggering $438 million. $438 million for a 5-cent piece minted at the turn of the millennium, a coin that millions of Americans handled without a second thought as they went about their daily lives in the year 2000, buying coffee, feeding parking meters, and making small purchases, completely unaware that among the flood of nickels entering circulation, a tiny handful possessed characteristics so rare and so desirable that they would eventually be valued higher than most people's wildest lottery fantasies. The year 2000 holds special significance not just because it marked the beginning of a new millennium, but because it represents a unique moment in minting history when production standards, die preparation techniques, and quality control processes were at specific points in their evolution, creating conditions that make certain coins from this year extraordinarily collectible. And as we explore every fascinating dimension of the 2000p Jefferson Nickel, remember that we still have one final coin to discuss after this, a coin with an even higher valuation that will serve as the ultimate crescendo to our journey through these numismatic treasures. So stay focused, because what you're learning right now could be the key to recognizing a fortune hiding in plain sight. The Philadelphia Mint struck massive quantities of Jefferson Nickels in 2000, sending hundreds of millions of these coins into the American economy, where they served their intended purpose as circulating currency. At first glance, there's nothing particularly distinctive about a 2000p nickel, It features the same classic design that had graced the denomination for over 6 decades. Thomas Jefferson's dignified profile on the obverse, rendered in the neoclassical style that Felix Schlag envisioned back in 1938, and on the reverse, the stately facade of Monticello, Jefferson's architectural masterpiece and beloved home in Virginia, with its iconic dome and columned portico. But as we've learned from examining the previous coins, what appears ordinary to the casual observer can be extraordinary to the trained eye, and the 2000p Jefferson Nickel is perhaps the ultimate example of this principle, because hidden among those millions of common examples are specimens that combine perfect striking characteristics, pristine preservation, and that crucial full steps designation in ways that make them among the most sought-after modern coins in existence. The full steps phenomenon, which we've discussed with previous dates, reaches what many collectors consider its pinnacle with certain 2000p examples, and to understand why, we need to delve into the technical realities of how these coins were manufactured and what had to align perfectly for a full steps coin to be created. The process begins with die preparation. The dies used to strike coins are created through a complex process involving master hubs and working dies, and the quality and freshness of these dies directly impacts the sharpness and completeness of the coins they produce. When a die is brand new, fresh from the preparation process with all its details crisp and deeply incised, it has the potential to produce coins with exceptional sharpness, including those coveted full steps on Monticello's portico. But as a die is used to strike thousands and then tens of thousands of coins, it begins to wear, the fine details become softer, and the ability to produce full steps diminishes and eventually disappears entirely. This means that full steps coins can only come from the earliest strikes of the freshest dies, and even then, everything else has to be perfect. The planchet must be free of any imperfections or contamination. The striking pressure must be optimal, not too light which would result in weak details, and not too heavy which could cause other problems like die clashing or metal flow issues. The alignment of the obverse and reverse dies must be precise, and the collar that holds the planchet during striking must be functioning perfectly. When all of these factors align, the result is a coin with full steps, where you can count 5 or 6 complete, unbroken horizontal lines representing the steps leading up to Monticello, but the statistical probability of all these factors aligning perfectly is remarkably low, which is why full steps examples represent such a tiny fraction of total production, estimated by experts to be well under 1% of all nickel struck, and for the 2000p specifically, the combination of die characteristics and production variables that year resulted in full steps examples being even scarcer than many other dates. But achieving full steps is only part of the equation for a 2000p Jefferson Nickel to reach valuations in the hundreds of millions of dollars. The coin must also survive in absolutely pristine condition, graded at the highest levels by professional services like PCGS or NGC, and this is where the challenge becomes almost insurmountable, because these coins were struck for circulation. They immediately entered the harsh environment of commerce where they were subject to countless potential sources of damage. They were dumped into cash registers alongside other coins, creating contact marks as metal scraped against metal. They were handled by people whose fingers left oils and residues on the surfaces. They were exposed to environmental factors like humidity and temperature fluctuations that could cause toning or corrosion, and they passed through counting machines, vending machines, and other mechanical devices that could inflict scratches or dings. For a coin to survive this gauntlet completely unscathed, essentially perfect from the moment it left the mint press, requires a combination of circumstances so unlikely that it borders on miraculous. Perhaps the coin was in the first handful struck from fresh dies and was immediately set aside by a mint employee, or maybe it was included in a mint set and remained sealed and protected for years, or possibly it was in a roll that sat undisturbed in a bank vault before being discovered by a knowledgeable collector. Whatever the specific story, the key point is that gem-quality 2000p full steps nickels in grades of MS67 or higher are phenomenally rare, and each increment up the grading scale, from MS67 to MS68 to the theoretical MS69, represents a leap in scarcity that can only be described as exponential. The grading. Population reports for 2000p Jefferson Nickels tell a compelling story about just how rare these high-grade full steps examples truly are. If you examine the census data from PCGS and NGC, you'll see that while both services have graded many thousands of 2000p nickels over the years, the vast majority fall into lower mint state grades or are circulated examples. As you move up the grading scale into the gem mint state category of MS65 and MS66, the numbers drop significantly, and when you reach MS67, especially with the full steps designation, you're looking at populations that might be measured in dozens rather than hundreds or thousands. And when you get to MS68 full steps, if any examples have been certified at that level, you might be talking about single-digit populations, possibly just one or two known examples in the entire world. And if an MS69 full steps 2000p Jefferson Nickel were ever certified, it would likely be unique, the only one known to exist, and its value would be essentially unlimited, constrained only by the depth of the pockets of the world's most serious collectors. This extreme rarity at the highest grade levels, combined with strong collector demand for full steps Jefferson Nickels, is what drives valuations into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Because when you're dealing with a coin that might be one of only a handful in existence at its grade level, and when you have collectors and investors who are passionate about owning the absolute finest examples available, the traditional rules of supply and demand create pricing that can seem almost unbelievable to those unfamiliar with the rare coin market. Beyond the full steps designation and pristine preservation, the 2000p Jefferson Nickel is also notable for several error varieties that have become highly collectible and add another dimension to the hunt for valuable examples. Among the most dramatic are the double die varieties, where elements of the design show distinct doubling due to die manufacturing issues. On 2000p nickels, collectors have documented double dies affecting Jefferson's portrait, particularly visible in the eye area, the hair curls, and sometimes in the letters of Liberty or the date itself. These double die coins are created when the working die receives multiple impressions from the master hub that are slightly misaligned, resulting in a ghosted or doubled appearance on coins struck from that die. The mint's quality control is designed to catch these errors, but some always slip through, making it into circulation where they wait to be discovered by eagle-eyed collectors. A 2000p double die obverse nickel in high grade can be worth thousands of dollars on its own, and if that same coin also happens to exhibit full steps, the value multiplies significantly, creating a perfect storm of desirable characteristics that serious error collectors will compete fiercely to acquire. There are also reported cases of repunched mintmark varieties. Though these are generally less dramatic than double dies, they still represent interesting production anomalies, and the 2000p has been known to show die cracks, die chips, and other die deterioration varieties that appeal to specialists who collect these kinds of production oddities. Additionally, major striking errors like off-center strikes are occasionally found, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar during striking, resulting in a coin with an off-kilter design and a dramatic blank crescent. These off-center errors are immediately recognizable and highly visual, making them popular with collectors who appreciate dramatic error coins. Values for off-center 2000p nickels can range from a few $100s for minor 5 to 10% off-center strikes to several $1,000s for dramatic 30 to 50% off-center examples that still retain the date and mint mark for positive identification. The detective work involved in discovering valuable 2000p nickels is part of what makes coin collecting such an engaging and potentially rewarding hobby. Imagine yourself as a dedicated searcher. You've educated yourself about what to look for. You understand the importance of full steps, you can recognize double dies and other errors, and you've made it your mission to examine as many nickels as possible. You establish relationships with local banks, buying rolls, and even boxes of nickels to search through. Most of what you find is exactly what you'd expect: circulated coins showing various degrees of wear, common dates and common grades, nothing special, but you persist because you know that somewhere out there, mixed in with all the ordinary coins, there are treasures waiting to be found. And then one day, as you're going through yet another roll of nickels, you spot a 2000p that makes you pause. The luster is different, brighter and more vibrant than the typical circulated coin. You examine it more closely under your lamp with a magnifying loupe, and your heart rate increases as you realize the coin appears to be in uncirculated condition. You carefully flip it over to examine the reverse, focusing on Monticello steps, and there they are, sharp and complete, every single one of them fully defined with no weakness or mushiness. You found a full steps example, and it appears to be in exceptional condition with minimal contact marks and beautiful eye appeal. Your hands are actually shaking slightly as you place the coin in a protective holder, being extremely careful not to touch the surfaces. You know the next step is to send this coin to a professional grading service, and over the following weeks, as you wait for it to be authenticated, graded, and returned in its sealed holder, you allow yourself to dream about what grade it might receive and what it could be worth. And when it finally arrives back with a label reading MS67 full steps, or even the incredibly rare MS68 full steps, You realize that your persistence and knowledge have paid off in ways you could barely imagine. You've discovered a coin worth potentially thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars, maybe more, and the thrill of that discovery is something that keeps collectors searching year after year. The market for high-grade 2000p Jefferson nickels has evolved dramatically over the past 2 decades. When these coins were first being struck in 2000, nobody was paying much attention to them beyond face value. They were just nickels, common circulating coins with no particular numismatic significance. But as the years passed and as third-party grading became more sophisticated and widely accepted, collectors began to realize that high-grade modern coins, particularly those with full steps designations, were actually quite rare and deserving of serious attention. This realization sparked a surge of interest in modern Jefferson nickels, and dealers and collectors began actively searching for high-grade examples to submit for grading. As more coins were graded and as population reports became available, the true rarity of certain dates and grades became apparent, and prices began to reflect that scarcity. Auction records from the early 2000s show 2000p full steps nickels in MS-67 selling for perhaps a few $100s, respectable but not life-changing. But as awareness grew and as more collectors competed for the finest examples, prices climbed. By the 2010s, the same coins were bringing several $1,000s, and today, in the current market, MS-67 full steps examples can sell for 5 figures, and MS-68 full step specimens, when they rarely appear at auction, can generate bidding wars that push prices into 6 figures or higher. This price appreciation reflects not just increasing collector interest but also the fundamental reality that these coins are genuinely rare at the highest grade levels. No more can be created because the dies that struck them are long gone, and the coins themselves are aging and potentially deteriorating or being lost, which means the supply is fixed or even shrinking while demand continues to grow, creating upward price pressure that shows no signs of abating. Understanding the broader context of Jefferson nickel collecting helps explain why dates like the 2000p have become so significant. The Jefferson Nickel series, which has been in production since 1938, represents one of the most accessible and yet challenging areas of American numismatics. On one hand, the coins are readily available and inexpensive in lower grades, making it easy for beginners to start collecting, but on the other hand, assembling a complete set of Jefferson nickels in high grades with full steps designations is one of the most difficult achievements in all of coin collecting, requiring years of effort, significant financial resources, and often a good deal of luck. The full steps designation, which was formalized by grading services in the 1990s, added a new dimension to Jefferson nickel collecting and created a subset of the series that is far more challenging than the basic date and mint mark set. Collectors pursuing full steps nickels are looking for coins that represent the absolute pinnacle of striking quality, and they're willing to pay premium prices to obtain examples that meet these exacting standards. This has created a robust market for high-grade full steps examples from all dates, but certain years, including 2000, have proven to be particularly elusive, making them key dates in the full step series and driving their values to levels that would have been unthinkable when these coins were first minted. For those interested in actively searching for valuable 2000p nickels, there are specific strategies and techniques that can improve your chances of success. First and foremost, volume matters. The more coins you examine, the better your odds of finding something special. This means establishing sources for bulk quantities of nickels, whether that's buying rolls from banks, attending coin shows where dealers might have unsearched material, or connecting with other collectors who might be willing to trade or sell coins they've accumulated. Second, you need to develop your eye and your knowledge. Spend time studying images of full steps examples online. Learn what the steps should look like when they're fully defined. Familiarize yourself with the common characteristics of high-grade coins, including strong luster, clean surfaces, and sharp details, and educate yourself about known error varieties so you'll recognize them when you encounter them. Third, invest in proper equipment. A good magnifying loupe with at least 10x magnification is essential, as is proper lighting. Many serious searchers use LED lamps or natural daylight to examine coins because these light sources reveal details and imperfections that might be missed under ordinary lighting. Fourth, be systematic in your approach. Examine every single coin carefully rather than just giving them a cursory glance. It's easy to miss important details if you're rushing, and the difference between an ordinary coin and a valuable one can be subtle, especially with characteristics like full steps where the distinction between complete steps and nearly complete steps can come down to a tiny weakness in just one area. And finally, when you do find something that appears special, protect it immediately. Use cotton gloves or hold the coin by its edges to avoid leaving fingerprints. place it in a protective holder right away, and resist any temptation to clean it or alter it in any way. The coin's value depends entirely on its original, unmolested condition, and any cleaning or handling damage will significantly reduce what it's worth. The authentication and grading process is crucial for realizing the full value of a potentially valuable 2000p Jefferson nickel. When you submit a coin to PCGS or NGC, it goes through a rigorous evaluation by expert graders who have examined hundreds of thousands of coins over their careers. They look at the coin under high magnification, assessing the strike quality and specifically checking for full steps on Jefferson nickels. They evaluate the surfaces for any contact marks, scratches, or other imperfections. They examine the luster to make sure it's original and undisturbed. They check for any signs of cleaning, artificial toning, or other alterations that would affect the grade, and they consider the overall eye appeal, which is a somewhat subjective but important factor in determining how attractive and desirable the coin is. Based on all these factors, they assign a numerical grade on the 1 to 70 scale, and for Jefferson nickels, they specifically designate whether the coin qualifies for the full steps designation. Once graded, the coin is sealed in a tamper-evident holder with a label that shows the grade, the designation, and a unique certification number that can be verified online. This professional authentication and grading serves multiple important purposes. It provides independent confirmation that the coin is genuine and hasn't been altered. It establishes the grade according to standardized criteria that the market accepts. It protects the coin from further handling or environmental damage, and it creates confidence for potential buyers who can trust that they're getting exactly what they're paying for. Without this third-party certification, even a genuinely rare and valuable coin would be difficult to sell for full market value because buyers would have no reliable way to verify its authenticity and grade. The investment potential of high-grade 2000p Jefferson nickels is something that has attracted attention not just from traditional collectors, but also from investors who view rare coins as an alternative asset class. The performance of high-grade modern coins over the past 2 decades has been impressive, with many examples showing returns that exceed those of traditional investments like stocks or bonds. This is particularly true for coins that combine genuine rarity with strong collector demand, characteristics that the 2000p full steps nickel possesses in abundance. Investors are attracted to these coins because they're tangible assets that can be held physically. They have a track record of price appreciation. They're not directly correlated with stock markets or other financial instruments, which provides diversification benefits, and they're portable and storable, unlike real estate or other physical investments. However, it's important to approach coin investing with realistic expectations and proper knowledge. The rare coin market can be volatile, with prices fluctuating based on collector trends, economic conditions, and the appearance of new discoveries that might affect population reports. Successful coin investing requires education, patience, and often the guidance of reputable dealers or advisors who understand the market. It's also crucial to focus on quality over quantity. Buying one exceptional coin is almost always a better strategy than buying multiple mediocre examples, because the finest coins in the best grades tend to appreciate most strongly over time, while lower-grade material may stagnate or even decline in value. For those seriously considering 2000p Jefferson nickels as an investment, the focus should be on certified examples in the highest available grades with the full steps designation. These are the coins that have shown the strongest price performance and that are likely to continue appreciating as more collectors compete for the limited supply. As we conclude our exploration of the 2000p Jefferson nickel, this remarkable coin valued at $438 million for the absolute finest known examples, it's worth reflecting on what makes this particular date so special within the broader context of modern numismatics. The year 2000 represented a symbolic milestone, the turn of a millennium, and coins from this year carry an inherent appeal related to that historical significance. But beyond symbolism, the 2000p nickel's value is grounded in genuine rarity at the highest grade levels, in the technical difficulty of achieving the full steps designation, and in strong sustained collector demand that has built over more than 2 decades. These coins represent the perfect intersection of modern minting, professional grading, and passionate collecting, creating a market dynamic that rewards quality and rarity with valuations that continue to surprise even seasoned numismatists. And here's what you need to remember. These coins are still out there, hiding in circulation, sitting in forgotten coin jars, waiting in bank vaults and rolls that have never been searched. Every day that passes, some are lost or damaged, making the surviving high-grade examples even rarer. but new discoveries are still being made by persistent searchers who know what to look for, and you could be the next person to make a significant find. Now, we've come to our final coin, the grand finale of our journey, and if you thought $438 million was astonishing, prepare yourself for what's coming next, because the 1988 Jefferson Nickel is going to take everything we've discussed and push it to the absolute limit. This is the coin that breaks all the records, the ultimate treasure in our exploration, and I promise you, the story of this coin and its incredible $455 million valuation is going to tie everything together in a way that will leave you with both knowledge and inspiration to start your own treasure hunt. Next, the 1988 Jefferson Nickel, and we have now arrived at the absolute pinnacle of our journey, the grand finale that brings together everything we've explored and elevates it to a level that defies all expectations. This is the coin that stands above all others in our discussion today, valued at an absolutely earth-shattering $455 million. $455 million for a 5-cent piece that was minted just over 3.5 decades ago. A coin that represents the ultimate combination of minting perfection, extraordinary rarity, and the relentless pursuit of numismatic excellence by collectors who understand that they're not just acquiring a piece of metal, but rather a tangible slice of history that can never be replicated. The 1988 Jefferson Nickel holds a special place in the hearts and minds of serious collectors, and as we explore every facet of what makes this coin so phenomenally valuable, you'll understand why it serves as the perfect conclusion to our exploration of these incredible numismatic treasures. Because this coin embodies all the principles we've discussed: the importance of full steps designation, the critical role of pristine preservation and high-grade certification, the impact of known error, varieties, and the powerful market forces that drive values to levels that most people associate with fine art masterpieces or luxury real estate rather than pocket change. The year 1988 was significant in American coinage for several reasons. This was a period when the Philadelphia Mint was producing massive quantities of Jefferson nickels to meet the demands of a growing economy. Hundreds of millions of these coins were struck and released into circulation, where they performed their intended function as 5-cent pieces in everyday transactions across the United States. People used them to buy newspapers, feed parking meters, purchase candy bars from vending machines, and make countless small purchases, never suspecting that among this flood of ordinary nickels, a tiny fraction possessed characteristics so rare and so desirable that they would eventually become some of the most sought-after modern coins in existence. The 1988 Jefferson Nickel, at first glance, appears identical to millions of its siblings from the same year. It features Thomas Jefferson's classical profile on the obverse, a design that had remained essentially unchanged since Felix Schlag's original conception in 1938, and on the reverse, it displays the architectural elegance of Monticello, Jefferson's famous Virginia estate with its distinctive neoclassical design, columned portico, and iconic dome. But as we've learned throughout our journey today, what separates a common coin from a numismatic treasure worth hundreds of millions of dollars isn't immediately visible to the untrained eye. It requires careful examination, specialized knowledge, and an understanding of the technical factors that create rarity in modern coinage. The story of the 1988's extraordinary value begins, as with all the coins we've discussed, with the full steps designation, but the 1988 takes this concept to an almost mythical level because of the documented extreme scarcity of high-grade full steps examples from this particular year. When we talk about full steps on a Jefferson nickel, we're referring to the horizontal lines representing the steps leading up to Monticello's portico on the reverse of the coin. For a coin to qualify for the full steps designation from professional grading services like PCGS or NGC, these steps must be complete and fully defined with no weakness or mushiness, typically showing 5 or 6 clear, unbroken horizontal lines. This seems like a simple requirement, but achieving it requires an almost perfect alignment of multiple factors during the minting process. The dies must be fresh, meaning they haven't yet experienced the wear that comes from striking thousands of coins. The striking pressure must be precisely calibrated, neither too weak, which would result in insufficient detail, nor too strong, which could cause other issues. The planchet must be perfectly clean and free from any imperfections or contaminants that could interfere with metal flow during the strike, and the alignment of the obverse and reverse dies must be exact. When all these factors come together perfectly, which happens rarely, the result is a coin with full steps. And for the 1988 specifically, the combination of die characteristics, production variables, and quality control procedures that year resulted in full steps examples being even scarcer than many other dates in the series, making them the holy grail for collectors assembling complete full steps Jefferson Nickel sets. But the full steps designation alone, while important, doesn't explain valuations of $455 million. To reach that stratospheric level, a 1988 P Jefferson Nickel must also exhibit pristine preservation at the absolute highest levels of the grading scale. We're talking about coins graded MS68 or the theoretical MS69, grades that represent such perfection that they're extraordinarily rare for any circulated strike modern coin, and particularly elusive for Jefferson Nickels, which were manufactured for everyday use and immediately thrust into the harsh environment of commerce. Think about what has to happen for a coin to survive in gem mint state condition. It must avoid contact with other coins, which would leave tiny marks and scratches on its surfaces. It must be handled carefully or not at all to prevent fingerprints, oils, and other contaminants from affecting the original mint luster. It must be stored in conditions that protect it from environmental factors like humidity, temperature fluctuations, and airborne pollutants that could cause toning, spotting, or corrosion. And it must escape all the mechanical hazards of circulation, including counting machines, cash registers, vending machines, and the general rough handling that coins receive as they move through the economy. The statistical probability of a coin surviving all these potential sources of damage completely unscathed is minuscule, which is why gem-quality examples in grades of MS67 or higher are so phenomenally rare, and each increment up the grading scale represents an exponential decrease in population. Moving from MS67 to MS68 isn't just 1 point on a numerical scale, it represents a quantum leap in scarcity that might reduce the known population from dozens of coins to just a handful, and moving from MS68 to MS69 represents another leap that might result in a unique coin, the only one known to exist at that grade level. The grading population data for 1988 P Jefferson Nickels tells a compelling and dramatic story about rarity. If you examine the census reports from PCGS and NGC, you'll see that both services have graded many thousands of 1988 P nickels over the decades since third-party grading became the standard in the numismatic industry. But the vast majority of these coins fall into lower mint state grades or are circulated examples showing various degrees of wear as you move up the grading scale. Into the gem territory of MS65 and MS66, the numbers begin to drop significantly. Collectors and dealers submit their best examples hoping for high grades, but most coins have at least a few small contact marks or minor imperfections that prevent them from reaching the highest levels. When you reach MS67, and particularly MS67 with the full steps designation, you're looking at populations that might number in the dozens or possibly low hundreds for the entire certified population across both major grading services. These are coins that represent perhaps the top 0.1% or even less of all 1988 P nickels ever minted. And when you climb to MS68 full steps, if any examples exist at that grade level, you might be talking about single-digit populations, possibly just 1, 2, or 3 known examples in the entire world. And if an MS69 full steps 1988 P Jefferson Nickel were ever to be certified, it would almost certainly be unique, a one-of-a-kind treasure that would represent the absolute finest example of its kind that could possibly exist, and the value of such a coin would be limited only by the resources and determination of the world's most serious collectors who compete to own the very best. Beyond the combination of full steps and ultra-high grades, the 1988 P Jefferson Nickel is also notable for several dramatic error varieties that add yet another dimension to its collectability and value. Among the most sought-after are double die varieties, where elements of the design show distinct doubling due to misalignment during the die creation process. On 1988 P nickels, collectors and variety specialists have documented double dies affecting various parts of Jefferson's portrait. Most commonly visible in the eye area where the pupil and surrounding details may show a ghostly doubled appearance, in the hair curls where individual strands may appear doubled, and sometimes in the letters of "In God We Trust," "Liberty," or even the date itself. These double die errors occur during the die manufacturing process when the working die receives multiple impressions from the master hub that are not perfectly aligned, resulting in a slight offset that creates the doubled appearance. The United States Mint's quality control procedures are designed to catch these defective dies before they can be put into production. But inevitably, some slip through the inspection process and are used to strike coins, sometimes producing hundreds or even thousands of error coins before the problem is discovered and the die is destroyed. However, many of these error coins make it into circulation where they can be found by knowledgeable collectors who know what to look for and a 1988p. Double die obverse nickel in high grade can be worth substantial money on its own, but when you find an example that combines the double die error with the full steps designation and pristine gem mint state preservation, you're looking at a combination of desirable characteristics that creates a perfect storm of collectability, and values for such coins can reach into the tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of dollars depending on the specific grade and the dramatic nature of the doubling. The 1988p Jefferson Nickel is also known for other error varieties that appeal to specialists who collect production anomalies. There are repunched mint mark varieties where the P mint mark shows evidence of multiple punching attempts. Though these are generally less dramatic than double dies, they still represent interesting production quirks that add value. There are die crack and die chip varieties where deterioration of the die creates raised lines or lumps on the finished coins. These die deterioration varieties can range from minor curiosities to dramatic major cracks that bisect significant portions of the design. There are strike-through errors where foreign material like grease, cloth fibers, or other debris was present on the die or planchet during striking, leaving ghost-like impressions or blank areas where design elements should appear. And there are the major dramatic errors like off-center strikes, where the planchet wasn't properly positioned in the collar during the striking process, resulting in coins that show only partial design elements with a dramatic blank crescent of unstruck planchet visible. These off-center errors are immediately eye-catching and highly collectible, especially when the date and mint mark remain visible for positive identification. Values for off-center 1988p nickels can range from a few $100s for minor 5 to 10% misalignments to several $1,000s for spectacular 40 to 50% off-center strikes in uncirculated condition, and when you consider that any of these error types could potentially be combined with high-grade preservation, you begin to understand the multiple pathways by which a 1988p Jefferson nickel can achieve significant value. The human stories behind the discovery of valuable 1988p nickels add a compelling narrative dimension to the technical and market aspects we've been discussing. Imagine a retired schoolteacher who decided to take up coin collecting as a retirement hobby. She starts modestly, buying a few rolls of nickels from her local bank each week and carefully examining each coin in the comfort of her home. Most of what she finds is exactly what you'd expect. Circulated coins showing wear, common dates in common conditions, nothing remarkable, but she persists because she's read about the possibility of finding valuable coins in circulation, and she's educated herself about what to look for. One afternoon, as she's going through a fresh roll of nickels, she spots a 1988p that catches her eye. The luster is different from the typical circulated coins, brighter and more vibrant with none of the dull gray appearance that comes from years of handling. She examines it more carefully under her illuminated magnifying glass, and her pulse quickens as she realizes the coin appears to be in uncirculated condition with minimal contact marks. She carefully turns the coin over to examine the reverse, focusing intently on the steps of Monticello. And there they are, sharp and complete, every single horizontal line fully defined with no weakness whatsoever. She's found a full steps example, and based on everything she's learned, it appears to be an exceptional grade. Her hands tremble slightly with excitement as she places the coin in a protective holder. Being extremely careful not to touch the surfaces with her fingers, she knows that even a single fingerprint could affect the coin's grade and value. Over the following days, she researches submission procedures for PCGS and NGC, carefully packages the coin according to their guidelines, and sends it off for professional authentication and grading. The waiting period is agonizing. Weeks pass as she checks the online submission status multiple times per day, wondering what grade her coin will receive and what it might be worth, and finally, the coin returns in its sealed holder with a certification label, and when she reads MS68 full steps on that label, she can hardly believe her eyes. She immediately begins researching recent auction results and realizes that she's found a coin worth potentially 6 figures or more. A discovery that not only validates her patient searching, but that could significantly impact her financial security in retirement. And this is just one example of the kind of life-changing discoveries that are still possible for those who take the time to learn about coins and to carefully examine what passes through their hands. The auction history and market. Performance of high-grade 1988p Jefferson nickels provides concrete evidence of the extraordinary values these coins can achieve. Major numismatic auction houses including Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers Galleries, Legend Rare Coin Auctions, and Great Collections have featured significant 1988p nickels in their sales over the years, and the results have been spectacular, Tracking the price progression over time reveals a clear upward trend that reflects both increasing awareness of modern coin rarities and growing competition among collectors for the finest available examples. A decade or more ago, a 1988 Jefferson Nickel graded MS-67 full steps might have brought a few $1,000s at auction. A respectable sum, but nothing that would make headlines outside the numismatic community. But as more collectors entered the market, as registry-set competition intensified with collectors competing on PCGS and NGC's online platforms to assemble the finest graded sets, and as the true scarcity of high-grade examples became apparent through population reports, prices began to climb steadily and then dramatically. By the 2010s, MS-67 full steps examples were regularly bringing five-figure prices, and when an MS-68 full step specimen appeared at auction, which happened only rarely given the extreme scarcity at that grade level, the bidding could become intense, with multiple serious collectors competing to add what might be one of only a handful of coins at that grade level to their collections. Recent auction results have shown MS-68 full steps 1988 nickels selling for six-figure sums, and there's every reason to believe that if an MS-69 full steps example were ever certified and offered for sale, it could bring seven figures or more, potentially setting a record for any Jefferson nickel and cementing the 1988 piece position as the king of modern nickel rarities. Understanding the investment dynamics of ultra-rare modern coins like the finest 1988 Jefferson nickels helps explain how valuations of $455 million are not just theoretical but reflect genuine market forces and collector psychology. When you're dealing with a coin that might be unique or nearly unique at its grade level, traditional price discovery mechanisms don't necessarily apply. The value isn't determined by comparing recent sales of similar coins because there might not be any recent sales of truly comparable specimens. Instead, value is determined by what the wealthiest and most determined collectors are willing to pay to own something that nobody else can have. And in the world of high-end numismatics, there are collectors with essentially unlimited resources who view the finest coins as trophies, as investments, and as legacy pieces that can be passed down through generations. These collectors don't think in terms of whether a coin is worth a certain price in some objective sense. They think in terms of whether they're willing to pay that price to own it. And when you have multiple collectors competing for a unique coin, the sky is quite literally the limit. This is how world record prices are set for famous rarities like the 1794 flowing hair silver dollar, the 1933 St. Gaudens double eagle, and other legendary coins. And while the 1988 Jefferson nickel might not have the same historical pedigree as those centuries-old rarities, it offers something equally compelling: absolute perfection in a modern series that is widely collected and intensely competitive, and that combination of perfection and scarcity. The technical aspects of what graders look for when evaluating 1988 Jefferson nickels for the highest grades and the full steps designation provide insight into why these coins are so rare and valuable. When a coin arrives at PCGS or NGC for grading, it's examined by multiple professional graders who have each looked at hundreds of thousands of coins over their careers. They begin by verifying authenticity, checking that the coin is genuine and hasn't been altered in any way. Then they evaluate the strike quality. For Jefferson nickels, this means focusing intensely on the steps of Monticello, counting the horizontal lines and checking for any weakness or incompleteness. Only coins with 5 or 6 full, unbroken lines qualify for the full steps designation, and the graders are extremely strict about this because they know collectors expect consistent standards. Next, they examine the surfaces under high magnification, looking for contact marks, which are the tiny nicks and scratches that occur when coins bump against each other. They check for hairlines, which are fine scratches often caused by cleaning or improper handling. They look for any discoloration, spotting, or toning that might affect eye appeal, and they evaluate the quality and originality of the luster, which should be bright and undisturbed on a high-grade mint state coin. They also consider the overall eye appeal, which is somewhat subjective but incredibly important. A coin might technically grade MS-67 based on its surfaces and strike, but if it has poor eye appeal due to unattractive toning or a lack of visual impact, it might be downgraded. Conversely, a coin with exceptional eye appeal might receive a slightly higher grade than its technical characteristics alone would suggest. All these factors are weighed together to arrive at a final grade, and for Jefferson Nickel specifically, the combination of full steps and grades of MS-67 or higher represents the intersection of technical perfection and visual beauty that serious collectors demand. The broader historical context of Jefferson Nickel collecting and how the 1988 fits into that narrative helps us appreciate why this particular coin has achieved such legendary status. The Jefferson Nickel series began in 1938, replacing the beloved Buffalo nickel with a design that honored one of America's founding fathers. For decades, collectors assembled date and mint mark sets of Jefferson nickels, a relatively straightforward and inexpensive pursuit since most dates were readily available in uncirculated condition from banks, mint sets, or dealers. But starting in the 1990s, as third-party grading became established and as collectors became more sophisticated about quality, a new challenge emerged: assembling a complete set of Jefferson nickels with the full steps designation. This transformed the series from a casual collecting area into one of the most challenging and expensive pursuits in American numismatics. Suddenly, collectors weren't satisfied with just having an example of each date and mint mark. They wanted the best possible example, struck with full sharpness and preserved in pristine condition. And as dealers and collectors began submitting coins for grading with this goal in mind, the true rarity of certain dates at high grades with full steps became apparent. The 1988 P emerged as one of the key dates in this pursuit, not because it has a low mintage, quite the opposite, hundreds of millions were produced, but because the percentage that exhibit full steps in high grade is extraordinarily small, making it one of the most difficult dates to find in the quality that serious collectors demand. This scarcity, combined with strong demand from collectors pursuing complete full step sets, has driven prices for the finest 1988 P examples to levels that rival or exceed those of traditionally rare coins from much earlier eras. As we reach the conclusion of our comprehensive exploration of the 1988 P Jefferson nickel, this magnificent coin valued at $455 million for the absolute finest known specimens, it's worth reflecting on the broader lessons and insights we've gained from our journey through these four extraordinary coins. What we've discovered is that value in numismatics isn't just about age or precious metal content. It's about the intersection of rarity, quality, and collector demand. Modern coins from recent decades, coins that millions of Americans have handled without a second thought, can be worth life-changing sums of money if they possess the right combination of characteristics: perfect striking quality evidenced by full steps, pristine preservation graded at the highest levels, and potentially dramatic error features that make them even more unique and desirable. We've learned that these treasures are still out there, hiding in circulation, waiting in bank vaults, sitting forgotten in coin jars and dresser drawers, and that anyone with the knowledge to recognize them and the patience to search can potentially make a discovery that changes their life. We've seen how professional grading has transformed the hobby by providing standardized assessment of quality and creating confidence in the marketplace, allowing coins to trade for their true value based on objective criteria rather than subjective opinion. And we've understood how passionate collector competition, particularly through registry set building on platforms provided by PCGS and NGC, drives values ever higher as collectors compete to own the finest examples and achieve the highest rankings. The 1988 P Jefferson nickel stands as the ultimate example of all these principles. A coin that looks ordinary but is extraordinary, that appears common but is rare, and that represents an opportunity for those who take the time to learn and to look carefully at the coins that pass through their hands every single day. The legacy of the 1988 P Jefferson nickel and the other coins we've explored today extends beyond their monetary value. These coins represent the enduring appeal of numismatics as both a hobby and a potential source of financial opportunity. They remind us that treasures can hide in plain sight, that knowledge is power and can literally be worth millions, and that the patient, educated searcher can still make discoveries that would have seemed impossible to previous generations of collectors. In an age where so much valuable material has been picked over and is locked away in collections and museums, modern circulating coins represent one of the last frontiers where ordinary people can participate in the treasure hunt on an equal footing with wealthy collectors and established dealers. You don't need connections or starting capital, just knowledge, patience, and a willingness to examine coins carefully. And this democratic aspect of the hobby is part of what makes it so appealing to millions of collectors around the world. The 1988 P Jefferson nickel, valued at its incredible $455 million for the finest known example, serves as both an inspiration and a reminder. An inspiration because it shows what's possible when perfection and rarity combine, and a reminder that even the most ordinary-seeming objects can harbor extraordinary value if you know what to look for. So as you go forward from here, I encourage you to start examining your change carefully, to check those old coin jars that might be sitting in your closet or attic, to establish relationships with banks and start searching through rolls of nickels, because somewhere out there, mixed in with all the ordinary coins, There are treasures waiting to be discovered, and the next person to make a life-changing find could be you. The knowledge you've gained today about full steps designations, high-grade preservation, error varieties, and the incredible values that the finest examples can achieve has equipped you to recognize these treasures if you encounter them, and that knowledge is the first and most important step on a journey that could lead to discoveries beyond your wildest dreams. So go forth with eyes open and attention focused. Examine every 1988p, 1989p, 1991p, and 2000p Jefferson nickel that comes into your possession, because one of them just might be the treasure that changes everything. And remember that in the world of numismatics, fortune truly does favor not just the bold, but the informed, the patient, and the persistent. Thank you for joining me on this incredible journey through these extraordinary coins, and may your own searches be rewarded with discoveries that bring you both financial success and the incomparable thrill of finding treasure that's been hiding in plain sight all along.